said it a long time ago.
Oh, good, okay. All right, well, then it's, sorry I'm late. It is, Wednesday, the 30th of April. It is, 5:09, and I will call to order this, uh, short, um, short scheduled follow-up to last week's meeting of the Smart Growth Steering Committee here in Hadley, with the voting members being Andrew Gnatic, Ronnie Williams, Mark Dunn, all present. And with that, I will hand it over to do we want to do public engagement? Doesn't look like we have any public comment or public. So not seeing anyone on the Zoom screen or in person, I would hand the mic over to PVPC.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. Today we're going to review a couple of draft documents and just finalize some details for our upcoming public forums scheduled in May. So I'm going to start off with sharing a outline that I think we're familiar with generally, but the details I think we will be getting into. That's new. I believe you can see my screen. Thank you first and foremost, Kayla, for confirming with both the Council on Aging the availability of the space on both dates, and also coordinating with Hadley Media to make sure that we have technical support. So the space can comfortably accommodate 80, and that would be a wonderful turnout, I think, if we were able to get that on either or both events. Both events are scheduled for a 2-hour time frame. Both events have the same draft agenda, general format, with a brief introduction and welcome from Mark, Steering Committee Chair, a 25-minute presentation from PVPC staff, which will be Aiden. Then there will be about a 60-minute window of open house conversations or breakout conversations. Each station will have a facilitator that will have some guiding questions and materials, along with a large flip chart to capture details, questions, thoughts. And then each will have some either visual poster that is for reference or even a passive activity. After the hour of breakouts, we'll do a quick round of report back where each station facilitator will get a chance to just give a kind of key takeaways from the flip chart. And then we'll hand it back over to Mark for some quick closing remarks where we can remind people of the next steps in the project, any future events or opportunities to stay involved. Last invitation for final thoughts at the different tables, and then a nice thank you and goodbye. So, looking at availability of steering committee staff and thinking about availability of PVPC planners to attend the events, Aiden and I have decided that we can really break it up into like 3 topics. So, broadly speaking, those breakout topics would be smart growth, housing, and the built environment. So at the smart growth station, we're thinking that the facilitator will have some materials, some facts and data to open the conversation, sharing smart growth principles, and reiterating some details, an overview of the 40R smart growth. materials that will be available for people at this breakout station will include some of the fact sheets regarding smart growth and particularly the impacts of development on impacts on school enrollment, um, property taxes, um, emergency services, infrastructure, and the like. The facilitator will have handout with the key questions. We've started to identify some key questions. And then we'll have some kind of follow-up questions just to help remind facilitators to keep the conversation going. But do want to just stress that the facilitator is there to kind of entice as much conversation and contribution from the attendees and the residents, not necessarily to speak or kind of dominate the conversation. We're really trying to listen to residents at these events and these breakouts. For the Smart Growth Station, we're imagining a poster that has a map of the Route 9 corridor. So kind of zoomed in on the corridor. So we'll break it into two sections. And we'll show the overlay districts lightly. And then we'll also pin some locations along the Route 9 corridor, because if you remember from our resident survey, we asked, where smart growth zoning should take place or be designated along Route 9. So we have some resident input already that we'd like to kind of show where people are already thinking, and we can put that on the map. Any questions about this breakout table? Any thoughts?
What are the other, because it's a little hard to read. Are you gonna go through housing?
Yeah, I'll go through both of the other two. I just didn't know if we had any strong questions at this point about a smart growth conversation.
And I haven't checked all my emails today. Did you already send this out, or are we just seeing this?
I'm sorry, I didn't send it out.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll send it out directly.
okay. I'm just saying, because I can't, I have eye limitations. I can't read stuff that far away. But no, so that was smart
That's
growth,
better. Much better.
poster map, 9, and I like that you were gonna highlight or pin, as you said, previous suggestions which have come in. Can you use a color or something to show sites that are currently undeveloped? And it would be fabulous to also have to identify sites that are, I'm not thinking of any off the top of my head, but if there's any that look, that are developed but not in use, like if there was a building that's empty. I don't know that we might have some, like, I'm not thinking of any, but then, just because these are things that I can imagine concerned citizens talking about, like, why develop undeveloped land if we can take something that's underutilized and have a developer convert it,
Like
Right.
school, the old school.
The old school, that's kind of a third rail.
Yeah.
Those exist. I know that we could probably quickly show undeveloped parcels along the corridor. When it comes to developed parcels that may be vacant, that might be harder for us to show. It really depends on the assessor's data that we are able to reference.
Right.
Sometimes the vacant question is not accurate, or that Aiden,
Yeah,
your thoughts?
right.
I'm not hearing you, Aid.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Muted on the headset. I was just saying, I think there are a couple things to maybe keep in mind here. One is how, first of all, how large these the map would be if it was considering like how large of an area it's considering. If we wanted to focus on a couple of particular areas along the Route 9 corridor, that would allow us to get to, a scale that where you could actually see, parcels and really be able to know like, oh, this is that location, this is that location. And if we want to scale it out so that people are like looking at the entire route, I don't know how well vacant parcels would really show up. So that's
Yeah.
one thought. The other thought is I think that we could get both vacant and underutilized parcels. I think that's included in assessor's data. Like the Department of Revenue has a land use code, I believe, for that. We could also look at types of uses that aren't usually a best practice in a smart growth district. Like, for example, industrial uses that maybe don't really mesh well with some of the goals related to smart growth, like walkability, pedestrian orientation, stuff like that. So those are just a couple of thoughts that I have. With that said, I think that the scale question would be my number one question. And if there are particular areas along the corridor that would be, that you all think would be useful to focus on, I just would want to maybe open that up too to see if because if there are, then we could really talk about getting down to the parcel level.
In an ideal world, I mean, I don't know what kind of presentation format, size, shape, portrait, landscape you were planning. But it would be nice, let's say it was landscape, to have, let's say at the top or at the bottom, whichever, the large scale overall, and then have maybe 2 or 3 zoomed in. Here are the zones that we're looking at, because it's always nice for people to reference back. Well, how does that tie into the rest of the town, or this part of town, or that part of town?
Mhm.
So it might be nice to be able to visually on one page toggle back and forth between here's the areas we're thinking and be reminded by where that fits into the grander scheme.
I will say, Mark, we can print posters that are landscape 36 inches by 48.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's big, yeah.
So that's about as big as our internal printing can
Yeah,
manage.
sure.
So that's what I was imagining for all of our posters. Either, the map would most likely be landscape, is better orientation. The others may be portrait, but
Right.
we'll see.
If there's a way to, I just keep thinking of the old overheads. If there were a way to put another layer,
Oh, yeah.
here's this parcel here, and then take that off.
Right. That would be probably ideal with a digital, but if we're going with a poster,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that would get a little more challenging. You'd need a clear overlay that you could pin and pull up and down. Well, now that sky's the limit with our new budget. Just have to cut back on the Chateaubriand and the bonbons for the
Right.
light refreshments, yeah.
Yep.
But no, I think to be practical. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but it might, in my mind, I'm trying to remember the DOT maps when they were presenting to us what they were gonna do for the highway project. And I feel like they had one long one that showed, from Northampton to Amherst, Route 9, with maybe a couple key boxes, say, here's the other ones that we're zooming in on, here's what we're doing in those. But yeah, I don't know how that actually falls into place on 36 by 48.
Unless we have like tracing paper that we can just hold up and quickly
Hmm,
take a marker.
yeah,
We need to.
yeah, I could get a roll of trace paper, so if somebody wants to say, what about this? You know,
Mhm.
I would be, I would be tickled if we had that strong of passion and interest
Right.
and ideas.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we will need to spend a little bit of time um, thinking about what's realistic in terms of the scale that we can print at and what degree of detail we can get to. I don't think we can don't necessarily think we can over promise at this point, keeping in mind that a lot of the work will fall on Aiden's hands in just a couple of days.
Yeah,
But we will definitely get the full length of the corridor depicted and key up some of those responses and what
yeah.
residents are already kind of thinking about where it might make sense to do this type of zoning. In terms of the questions for smart growth, we're working on a couple more, but the two that we think are kind of the key conversations to get started, to get people thinking about, first and foremost, where could smart growth, zoning as a district work, focusing on the corridor, the Route 9 corridor, but then really expanding that into the conversation of, what's the balance of uses for a new district? What makes sense to include? What makes sense to keep in proximity, and what uses really need to be excluded or separated? I'm going to let you all have that conversation. I just need to mute and step aside real quick.
So Aiden, did he say he had two questions already? I'm sorry, I was scribbling notes.
sure. Yeah. So I think the first question is just, where would a smart growth district work? And then we're wanting to get into a question of balance. So regarding uses. So what sort of maybe the ratio of different types of uses that would make sense, commercial and business and residential. And I think, there could be some additional sort of spin-off questions from that. Like, is there room for residential only sections within this district? And that, of course, ties into housing. So these questions are all, of course, interrelated. So you want to make sure that you're drawing some distinctions and not getting in the weeds for a different table, unless, maybe that'll happen. But and sort of, yeah, what concentration of development is appropriate? I think that, typically, like I was saying, there are some uses that aren't typically seen as being conducive. So like I said, industrial uses, things like that, things that aren't pedestrian oriented, but there's usually a focus on a mix of uses. So yeah, I think that's what Kyle was getting at with that first question.
Any other thoughts?
I think my only lingering question is for the steering committee members, is this a table that you would prefer to leave to PVPC staff, or is anyone really excited about jumping in on this one yet? Or do we want to wait and hear the other options?
I'm gonna just move up closer to the screen where I can see better, but I don't think any of us has any prior life experience with smart growth, and I personally would defer to the planners on smart growth. Other things, housing, we all have lifetime opinions and experiences.
Sure.
My 2 cents.
Makes sense to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and tag PVPC on the smart growth conversation.
Okay.
Moving on to the next breakout theme, conversation focusing on housing. We're going to provide some kind of introductory data coming from the housing production plan. We'll include the latest subsidized housing inventory numbers. Mark, thank you for sharing that today. We'll make sure to incorporate that. And then we'll also include some of the requirements for the 40R smart growth zoning, because there are affordability requirements for any smart growth 40R smart growth zone. Is required to have district-wide a minimum of 20% affordable units. So we'll prepare some introductory data talking points to help prime the conversation. Then we can include handouts, additional materials at the table, primarily the fact sheets related to housing, those focused on just providing some definition, building the case of why additional or new housing development is a pressing issue, why Hadley specifically needs more, who would benefit, and then a breakdown of how that relates to particular population groups or subpopulation groups. The questions for the facilitator. Right now we've identified 2 large questions. We're welcome any suggestions for more, but tying this into some of the survey materials that we've already received, or survey responses. First, we want to know what housing types would residents like to see developed along Route 9. And then we'd want to ask what percentage of new housing should be affordable. We're imagining 2 posters or visuals for this station. One would be mostly reference. So this is the missing middle poster. So from the survey, we included a nice kind of graphic, an informative graphic that shows this range of housing types that is commonly called the missing middle. And that's pretty much anything that's not a typical single family dwelling that we are most familiar with, and not quite what might be called a 5/1, a high-rise apartment development. So we'll include that image on a nice large poster, but we'll also break down and show kind of the percentage of responses that the survey takers selected, the duplex or the triplex or the townhouses, or the various options. And then we are imagining a passive poster, passive activity that's very similar to what we had as resident survey question number 6 regarding the housing scales. So we provided some side-by-side images and asked survey takers to kind of rank the preferences of those. So we're imagining a very similar activity where we can give dots to attendees, and they can kind of select or rank their preferences in terms of those images and those housing types. Any thoughts on the housing station?
Yeah, I have a question on the what percentage of new housing should be affordable? Isn't the threshold 40%? Is that correct?
The threshold 40?
Isn't there's a threshold for the 40R affordable houses? Like,
So there's a requirement that district-wide at least 20% of all houses are capital A affordable.
So-
That's defined as less than 80% area median income.
So would the town be able to say then say, well, we'll raise that 20% to 30%? Because if I'm a developer, like the answer would just be 20% and then move forward with the rest, the 80% being market.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, those are great questions, Andrew. So there are a couple things that the town can determine in the zoning bylaw to play with the kind of threshold of affordability. So two things. They can go above, first, the town can decide to go above the district-wide requirement of 20%, right? So you could say that district-wide, you're actually hitting a goal of, or the town would like to set a goal of 30, 40, 50% affordable. So you could have that conversation. The second thing that can be discussed is at what scale of a development project does the affordability requirement set in? So the baseline in the 40R bylaw is actually projects of 13 or more units, right?
Mhm.
Are then required to have a percentage of affordability. So the way the bylaw is written, a developer can come in and say, I'm going to build 12 units. I'm not required to do any affordability. Right. So that's something that I think would be worth teasing out. And we can work on our end to try to make sure that you have those kind of requirements articulated succinctly, so that you can kind of guide the conversation, or get some feedback that's meaningful for our work writing a bylaw in the future.
Okay.
Can we also, on that, piggybacking on that, is there any reason we can't say, all right, so we want, let's say, 30% to be at that capital A affordable? Could we say we also want another 25% to be lowercase affordable? So that's what might that, in your experience, would that be 100% or 120% of AMI? What would that, or that varies from community to community?
Yeah, that's a great question in terms of the mixing of the incomes and setting a broader definition of affordability. Typically, affordability is oftentimes expanded to, I think, the 120% AMI threshold, which is oftentimes called workforce housing. That range of, greater than 80% AMI, but less than 120% AMI.
Yeah.
In terms of how that relates to 40R, I'm not recalling, and I would defer to Aiden at this point if he might recollect.
Sure. Well, I guess so. I don't know that going above 80% does relate to 40R. But I guess my immediate thought is I'd be curious to know, and I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to review the documents for Hadley, but I mean, what is the sort of median rent or home price? Because it might fit within that under that 120% AMI just naturally, because that's what the market is. So you wouldn't necessarily have to regulate for that. You'll find that is usually more relevant in places like Boston, for example, where there's a lot of economic sort of income disparity, and there are things that are regularly priced at like way above the AMI for the area, but that might not be the case for Hadley. So I guess that would be one thought. But also I'm not sure how like regulating for 120% AMI does relate to 40R, because the standard for 40R is 80 and below.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just anticipating that we could get someone saying, well, great, you've provided this 30% or whatever percent we, 20 to 30%. And then everything else is gonna be market. And I know that when we did I know it's not the same thing, but the one senior housing that was done, a lot of the feedback I've heard is that they're beautiful, but they're not as affordable as people would have hoped they would be.
Right.
And that I hear a lot of chatter in town about, I raised my kids here. I want to stay near my grandkids. I want my kids to be able to live in town. I want to be able to downsize. And I can't afford to. So that's why I was thinking of the lowercase a affordable. So that we didn't just get the affordable and then market rate. If there was something in between. Cause we can't eliminate the market rate or we'll not get a developer to even sniff around. I get that. But maybe we can, try to cover the needs and would, tell me if I'm right or wrong, cause I could hear this question coming. By that percentage of affordable housing, 80%, below 80% of the AMI. Depending on the local preference percentage we put on it. Above that, it's there will be people that are encouraged and people that are discouraged by the idea that it would be inviting non-Hadley workforce to come to Hadley. And I know there's certainly a group that wants to see that. Like we talked about the scenario that you could work in the malls and live nearby and not have to, have a car and pay gas to commute every day and have your car, repaired. I guess where I was going is if someone says, oh, well, you're trying to bring in outsiders. How do you have a typical answer for that? Like, I mean, my thought is, I don't know that we're trying to bring in outsiders, but we're trying to drop the barriers that currently keep them out.
Mhm.
So that we don't just end up as a community of McMansions. That's what I often hear is that all the new houses are these big McMansions that you can't afford to sell your house and move in there, especially if you're on a fixed income or whatever, I don't.
Right. Yeah. Mark, you're identifying a really sadly common kind of question and uh, talking point that comes up in the conversations, particularly as we think about zoning changes that are designed to encourage more housing. Generally, what we say is that, Fair Housing Act and 40R equally states that you can't create restrictions or limits on the population that the housing is built for. So you can't even have like an age restriction element in a 40R district. So you
Right.
couldn't say, that it was, for seniors specifically. You could not put, unlike a 40B affordable development, a 40R development can't even, I believe, put a local preference on, you can't have a lottery and then say that, the first, half of the slots are designated for local residents. So that's a fact that we'll make sure that we have at the facilitator's disposal, but ultimately, you kind of just have to share those realities and press forward. Um,
So the local preference, that goes with a 40B, that is not an option in a 40R. Okay,
Which 40B is,
do you want to explain the 40B? You could do it
Yeah,
better
of
than I.
40B, Ronnie, 40B is just refers to the Massachusetts General Law 40B. And that allows for an applicant to pursue a developer to pursue what's called a comprehensive permit. And it's perhaps a misnomenclature because it's not like a singular permit for a development, but it's what it allows is a developer to meet a threshold of affordability in their housing development in their project. And by pursuing a 40B, a comprehensive permit, they essentially bypass the typical permitting channel. They kind of skip past the planning board and they go directly to the ZBA to show how their project meets local needs. And sometimes those applications are kind of well received and well thought out. And there's conversation between the developer and the municipality. Sometimes in those instances, it's often referred to as a friendly 40B. And then there's the unfriendly 40B option where the developer really is not interested in local concerns or preferences, and they're just, following the law as it's on the books.
And the
that's
law-
when there aren't enough percentage of
If-
affordable housing.
If we're below 10%.
Right.
Thank you.
And-
Yes. Yeah, that's the detail I forgot. My explanation. So
That-
so luckily Hadley is with the 11 point something percent SHI.
Mhm.
There is no option for an unfriendly 40B development coming before the town.
Yeah,
So
so for,
I think a developer could still go through a 40B process requesting a comprehensive permit.
the town would have to be cooperative.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It'd have to be-
And the town could ultimately deny it and say, no, you have to go through the standard zoning permit.
Just remind me with the 40R,
Mm-hmm.
that housing can be owned or rented
Yes.
or.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something that the zoning article could prescribe that, I mean, that you have like a minimum or a maximum number of rental units?
That is a great question. I don't think
Yeah.
that we've actually had that question raised before, at least that I've heard. Although Kyle, I don't know, maybe are you familiar with that?
I'm not remembering us discussing that particular
Yeah.
distinction in our other communities that have
Well,
explored it. So yeah, we could look at that.
Arguments for both. I mean,
Right.
if I want to stay in town on a fixed income and I can't afford anything else, then maybe rental, a month by month is easier to do than a straight out purchase.
Mhm.
I don't know. Sorry, this was supposed to be focused on the presentation and I'm probably making this.
Is,
That's a good question. It really
Uh,
is.
No, I ultimately your
Anticipated
questions,
Yeah,
your questions will help us prepare for the conversations, right? And better prepare whoever ends up wanting to tackle this conversation.
and we do need to know what the AMI is. In
Yes,
Hadley.
yeah, and that would be we'll ensure to include that. That's
Mhm.
that's accessible in the housing production needs data,
yeah.
and we'll confirm that it's up to date. think.
I'm
Think it's,
I'm willing to take on the housing station if nobody else is jumping at it, you know.
Cool. The other thing that I just would want to just make a note of is, in addition to the really great comment about wanting to ensure that we are being clear, like that there's a minimum affordability requirement for 40R, we'd also want to make sure that we're including that there's a minimum density requirement. And that would shape to some extent this conversation, as well as probably actually the smart growth conversation. So yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind as well, that, you know, when we're asking what types of housing residents would like to see, if we decide, the town decides that they want to stick with 40R, there, I mean, you can have different types of housing. You can still, of course, have single family housing, two-family housing, but it has to meet a certain density minimum. So I guess just making that clear as well. Like the lot, you know, size would have to be such and such, more or less, to fit in. So just want to, I guess, make a note of that too.
And the density, just for, if we get this question, when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about minimum density, you're talking about how many units per parcel,
Per acre. Yeah.
per acre.
How many
So
units
if
per
it's-
acre?
Right,
Mhm.
so whether it's it's not gonna be a single family, it could be a duplex, a triplex, whatever, apartment, do that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it even could be a single family, but it has to be, the minimum is 8 different single family units per acre.
Okay,
So that's, but yes. Um,
and when we say single family, that means it's freestanding, it's not attached, it's not, or does a townhouse act as a single family?
yeah.
Uh,
No, go ahead, Kyle.
townhouses are considered single family, and I
Yeah, I think so.
believe they can be attached.
Yep. I
Right.
think that in reality there is some leeway with a lot of these things. We've been talking to the state about it, but like questions like that. But so yes, pretty sure it can be attached.
If I'm not going too far down a rabbit hole, just for reference, if you come through Northampton past the post office and you make that bend towards Hadley, there's a new housing project on the right there. Do you know, are those townhouses? Do you have any idea? I have no idea. I think there's 3 separate buildings and I think each one might have multiple units in it. And that, maybe that's something, if we don't know offhand, it's something we can find out, because that might be something people might help them scale it.
Which
Yeah.
folks,
When you, right where Pomeroy, Terrace tears off of Route 9, you come out of Northampton, past, Fitzwillies, you go past the post office.
oh, yeah,
And then there's a bend, and right before that bend, there's
Oh, right, yeah.
there's some new housing that happened before you get to,
by the railroad track.
before you get to the school. What's the school on the left?
St. Michael's, oh, used to, but no,
No, I'm thinking of,
but they're all gray and there's that giant
yes,
condo building.
yeah,
Can't miss it.
yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, but that's a really good example, because yeah, people will have questions, and if we can point to existing development that they're familiar with, yeah, that's a great way to, give people the right idea of what we're talking about. So we'll
Right,
look into that.
They might say, yeah, I like that, but I'd like to see it pushed back off the street more, or,
Right.
Right, I agree, rather than the drawings that we have.
right, something you can
just a
visualize,
Photo.
yeah.
that we can show of it.
It might be good to, maybe wasn't there some new housing built in Amherst along Route 9?
Yeah,
Over by Amherst College?
people are a little upset with that.
Yeah. Well, there's stuff along University Drive that's like apartment buildings that go back off of,
Mhm.
but there's something right by Amherst College, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
also one by Triangle Street.
By the fields. Oh, okay, Triangle Street.
towards the high school, there's one where,
Oh, there's that wedge building. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right in downtown, those are tall. Those are like
Those are
5-story,
so
and
tall.
those are lightning
ungodly.
rods for, yeah, that's changing the character and the feel, and that's what I don't think any of us want.
No,
No. But I think, so if most houses are 1 to 2 story, if we allow 3-story, I'm thinking that might be acceptable to most people. But that's just my opinion. But I don't think anyone wants to see 4 or 5-story. I don't think any of us wants that.
I'm sure we'll get some of those questions, though,
Yeah, yeah,
And of course,
rightfully so.
back to the DPW and the fire trucks and
right.
whether they can reach them.
I think we just got a new ladder truck, didn't we?
We just don't have a place to put it.
Or we ordered it,
Yeah,
because they're usually like 2 or 3 years out, I think, with you. Or we approved ordering it.
So before we move off on and leave the housing topic, any other questions or thoughts that we may want to try to make sure we're providing either data for the facilitator or a guiding question? Or both. Both.
Hogging all the questions, but I'm sure you guys have questions. Okay,
I've been saying them when I have them, so.
good.
Thank you. All right, Mark, we'll try to get you as much info as possible.
Okay,
But we'll leave the trace paper to you. You can bring the trace paper.
I will, yes.
A different activity, but all right. So our third station, our third breakout conversation, we're calling the theme built environment. So this includes a few different elements that are related to the 40R bylaw and smart growth broadly. So that includes design standards. So what the structures themselves need to look like, and other elements of a development or a project need to look like. There are design standards currently in the village center, so we can try to pull up some of those so that folks can get a sense of kind of what is already on the books in town. Other elements that are typically included or we're going to include in kind of the guiding questions is the question or the topic of green open space and or green features, green amenities. We had a resident survey question about this, and we had some pictures of kind of like tree-lined sidewalks and streets and green alleyways and pocket parks and community gardens and the like. So we can have that's a potential poster idea, but we're going to have some questions related to that. And then the big hot potato, potentially the third rail, is going to be parking. So we don't have really fact sheets related to this from the survey, but we'll have some materials to share. We'll pull out any excerpts from the Village Center design standards we think are relevant or helpful in demonstrating kind of what you're thinking about and what may be included in a bylaw. Questions for the facilitator that we've already identified. So this first bullet on the topic of open space, the kind of the big question is, should each project have an open space requirement? That if the answer is yes, then the follow-up is, what scale or percentage of a project area? So, does that mean that a small redevelopment of a single family lot is required to have open space, or is this really for the large, currently zoned commercial lots that are not getting a lot of use and attention? So that's kind of the follow-up in that line of thinking. The second bullet here is focused on the topic of parking. So first and foremost is, would you like to see the same parking standards continued? That really gets to The follow-up is, is there a need for more or less total parking? There's the follow-up or the additional question of where would you prefer parking placed? This one we might want to tweak a little bit because 40R does require parking away from the front of the building, and the front is defined as the space between the right-of-way frontage and the frontage facing facade. So where would you prefer the parking is really kind of just get a sense of what people are thinking and try to lead the conversation to, parking be better suited behind property or even to the side. And then there's an additional question of, would you encourage shared parking lots? So in the instance of, if we really start thinking about truly mixed use projects, not just, we sometimes distinguish mixed use in the planning and development professions as horizontal or vertical. So there are examples of horizontal mixed uses in the village center of Hadley where you see, an existing residential dwelling kind of surrounded by either a small business or there might even be a little convenience store right nearby. And you kind of have this mixing of uses on separate lots. That's a horizontal mixed use. But 40R, we're considering vertical. We're thinking about within a singular structure, mixing uses and stacking those on top of each other. So if you think about a dentist office or a retail on the first floor and someone living above that, there's the potential for shared parking where there's enough lots for both uses at the appropriate time of day. Residential parking in the non-business hours, essentially. So there's a conversation there to be had. And then our final thought is, and this is really kind of relates to this first one, so I'm just gonna quickly do that and plug it back in. So this question is, how should the smart growth district relate to the rail trail? So depending on where residents want this district to be along Route 9, it's a high likelihood that it will relate in some way to the rail trail. So should projects that abut the rail trail include some type of connection or an access point? That's just kind of a conversation starter there.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer.
It could be.
But that's my opinion.
Yeah. It may be a no-brainer for, parcels that immediately abut the rail trail. It may be one of those things, there might be a circumstance that that could come to mind for a resident that says, there's a parcel over here that's just not quite close enough and it doesn't make sense. Those types of things may come up, but in terms of the poster and or visuals for this one, we haven't quite figured that one out. I think we could provide some of those images that we shared in the survey that spoke to kind of open space and green features. And we could also possibly, even in a combined single poster, we could even provide some diagrams, more of like an infographic to help people think about design standards. Because it's difficult sometimes in this part of the bylaw because you're putting into text very visual realities, right? And that's how people are going to think about it. So having some diagrams that help either introduce some terms or just demonstrate, what side parking and rear parking looks like on a building. We could create some type of graphic that combines some images and helps just build kind of a shared vocabulary for folks as they're talking about these things.
Yeah.
Why can't we have, like I just sent you guys a photo of that development in Northampton, but there are enough places around. I mean, we go around with our phones and snap pictures of the kind of thing. And that's a little misleading because it's the stuff on the right that you really see on Route 9. You don't see a whole lot of the 3-story part when you're
Right.
driving. To me, that's much more useful than the diagrams and the drawings to actually see a picture of parking. You know, like at the old South Street School, the parking's on the side and the back, and over by the Northampton Senior Center.
Yeah, Bridge.
We have to have those on a computer or something, or, you know.
Thank you for sharing that, Ronnie. This is actually a very good kind of just snapshot of this variety of housing that, you know, we're interested to hear what Hadley residents say.
On Route 9, and it's not where I would want to live in one of those.
Yeah, right. But it can work, right? This is kind of a proof of concept that it can work. This type of housing can work on a busier thoroughfare.
Mhm.
And there
And
can
this-
still be enough of a space that might seem comfortable to some. It might not be comfortable for many, but some might find this acceptable. And then there's a variety, right? You have your 3-story stacked flats. It looks like there might be a townhouse right here at the end, or maybe a second entrance, but these are looks like duplexes that may or may not. Let me see. Yeah, those are duplexes. So you got
Yeah,
two
I
two
guess
units.
when I first moved here, I lived on Route 9, right by Amherst College, right where the hill goes up, and you could hear the trucks with their air brakes, but coming from Manhattan, it didn't seem so noisy.
It's like crickets compared to
So it's sounding like maybe like a photo board or something that more like that is would be a helpful poster visual aid for this conversation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you were talking about design standards. I mean, I could see that we want to, I don't know how you word it, but we want some percentage of or we don't want flat roofs. You know, we don't want a LA modern building with all the HVAC on the roof. Because that wouldn't fit in with our more colonial style of town. Our corridor.
Hmm.
That being said, when it's in a more commercial area, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting that you mentioned that, Mark, because you're right. I think would be valuable to, you know, provide some visuals that help show the vernacular, right? Is that the term, the building vernacular that's common and kind of traditional in New England?
Yeah.
And while that's the standards that are articulated in the village center, you may drive along Route 9 and pass some drive-throughs and buildings, you know, across from the school and see flat roofs, right? And see block buildings. And
Yes.
there's a reason those haven't been brought up to the standards, right? They existed before the standards were put in place. That's why they're there. And there's a reason why they're not quite fitting into the intention of the design standards just yet.
I can't picture any of those east of the rail trail crossing, you know.
Oh.
I think that tends to happen the closer you get to the malls. You know, is where you start to get those commercial
Mhm.
type buildings. I think,
Very true.
yeah, even like where Bill Dwyer's office is next to the post office, and the post office has a shingled sloped roof. The building he's in has a big sloped roof. The bank across the way looks very um colonial. And then you have the bank, the brand new bank that just went in out at the corner by Trader Joe's. Now that's commercial. So that's not gonna have your, you know.
We have Dunkin' Donuts, we have,
Does Dunkin' Donuts have a flat roof or is it a pitched roof? I can't
Pitched
remember.
roof, cause it used to be a bank.
Is it?
and
Okay.
there's a bank, you
Yeah.
know.
Mr. Donut there? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was also Shawnet Bank at one point,
Hmm.
years ago.
I mean, I'd be willing to go around and take some photos, but
Yeah.
do you guys have the ability to print them?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that, Ronnie, I appreciate and would very much like to take you up on that offer because that
Yeah.
would save us a lot of time and
Yeah.
stress of getting, what could be very relevant and, local examples of what the conversation, what we're trying to refer to.
And who's the best person to send them to, Aiden?
Yeah, you can send those to me,
Yeah, yeah,
please.
moving
Yeah.
forward.
Aiden, I don't have your email and how to
Oh.
spell your, so.
Yeah, it's AHE, right?
But my email, yeah, it's my first initial, and then is there a way I can type it out? I have a very long, convoluted name, so I can spell it out for you, but it might be
Ronnie,
easiest
if
Yeah.
just to make it easier, Ronnie, I'm going to respond to the email you sent me with that Google Map link. I'll CC Aiden's email so you'll have it.
There you go, perfect. We don't want to put it up on the screen and have ice grab it.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ronnie, for that offer. That'll be a huge help.
Yes,
Okay, good.
thank you. Um. We have one more meeting before the 17th, right?
I think we can get one more. The question is, do you do it next week and give us a little? So yeah, so
I was thinking
we have two Wednesdays before the first event.
Yeah.
The question is, do we reconvene quickly?
So on the 14th, yeah, well, that's up to you. Do you need time? Cause I was thinking the 14th would give us, might be a little short order to figure out what we're gonna do for refreshments or any other logistics. Uh, what are your thoughts?
So I can share that unfortunately I will not be available on the 7th. I have another meeting.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so that's,
I think that means the 14th is your
Yeah,
option because
it
I am
does.
definitely unavailable on the 7th. I might not be at home. I might be at the hospital still. So,
Right, okay. Is that the inducing date?
Sunday night,
Oh, okay.
we're going in Sunday night to get started.
Is everybody okay with the 14th? That would be our normal schedule, would be second and fourth Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Thought we were on the first and third, but I could be wrong. I've lost track. I don't know what date it is, Mark. I'm sorry.
May 14th. You're saying?
May
That works.
14th.
Yeah, it should be good.
Okay.
Just make sure I am, since I'm suggesting it. I actually had it on there from 5 to 6, so I think we were second and fourth Wednesdays was what we came up with. I think because the first and third Wednesdays is when Randy has
Oh,
Uh,
right.
select board.
Right. Great. Okay.
Dawn brings over Marblehead.
Oh, right. This is the fifth Wednesday. That's what happened.
Yes, that's why we squeezed in a, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yes, I think the 14th would be, more helpful. I'll do my best to contribute and fill in some of these gaps for Aiden, but a lot of this is going to be on falling on his shoulders. We will likely request another colleague just to be present, to be supportive at these events, so that if any of the steering committee members become unavailable or just to provide additional support. I think we've decided that that's probably best course of action.
Sure.
I don't believe we identified anyone that wants to facilitate the built environment, is that a hand, Andrew?
Yeah, I can do it if no one
I can
else.
do it.
You want?
You.
Or if you have a preference on housing, you know,
No, I like, this,
the build, yeah,
yeah, I can do.
okay.
We're gonna
Or
put you
you-
both. I'm gonna put you both down. Feel free to tag
on that.
team, join it, double up. I know Ronnie, you're still just going to be attending the one meeting, right? Or you got
Hopefully, I will have my surgery on the 21st, so yes, I will not be at the other one.
right? Okay, yeah. So, and then of course, this we do have other select board or select steering committee members. I guess I just told you who I was thinking about, but we have other steering committee members who we can assign at the 14th or at our next meeting to provide support.
We used to say, be careful if you don't
Yep.
do the meeting, you get nominated for everything.
Yep.
You can't object to it.
It's like an attendance incentive.
Yeah. So I see that we're running kind of later than
Yeah.
typically. There's one thing that there's two things that we still need to discuss. The announcement flyer, which I have a draft of. I would like to get some quick feedback on. And then the FAQ packet, which I'm condensing and reformatting to make it a little bit smaller. And I'm waiting to see if there's any additional comments from Mark. But
Yes, I'm gonna get you stuff. I'm gonna have that drafted by Thursday night, and then Friday morning, I've scheduled to meet with Scott McCarthy, the director of DPW.
okay,
I wanted to draft something up and run it by him, and if he says, no, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I said, then I can tweak that. And I'll also include my notes from my discussion with Dr. Annie McKenzie about the school system, because I was assuming that was part of the infrastructure as well, because people often say, oh, if we get too many new people in town, the schools will suffer, and she said, not at all, so.
There's
we already have a fact sheet on the school system.
Oh, you do, okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the information that's outstanding is just in terms of utilities, capacity, and the like.
All right.
isn't also like tied into a 40R or 40S.
So 40S is actually, that's a good point, Andrew. So very quickly, 40S, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a reimbursement program for communities that adopt 40R zoning and new development creates unexpected enrollment increases on the local school district. To date, there are only 2 communities that have ever applied for reimbursements through the 40S system. And it's not been a consistent annual application. So it's one of those things that I think it falls into a category of under or rarely funded programs and underutilized or understood opportunities for the communities.
So that's above and beyond isn't there
3,000?
isn't there some kind of, funds that come from the state if you have a successful project, you know, if you.
Yeah.
There's
So
there's something if you zone it, and there's something else, there's more if you actually have a successful project, right?
correct. So for 40R, there are two types of incentives. There is the upfront incentive payment that is given to the municipality once you've adopted the 40R zoning and HLC says looks good. They send a one-time incentive payment up to $600,000. That value is being reassessed currently, to my understanding. There is a second incentive payment that is given that equates to $3,000 per dwelling unit, new dwelling unit, right? So how the state awards that money is in the annual 40R reporting that is required. Some of the information that the community has to give the state is how many building permits were issued in the 40R district. The state looks at that number and says, all right, you permitted 20 new dwellings. That's 20 times 3,000. Here's your bonus payment for this year based on your new dwelling units that are online.
And they have to be built?
So,
That's,
I believe they give it on the annual basis of based on what's been issued during that year. So
Okay.
permitted that year.
Yeah.
I could be mistaken on that, but that's how I've understood it. That's also in the annual reporting, that's also how they gauge the affordability threshold. So if in that annual report, you know, you might have permitted 20 new dwellings, but none of them are in a project that requires affordability, and the district is less than 20% as a whole, so it's not meeting the requirements of the district. Those bonus payments, it's my understanding, the state's practice is to withhold bonus payments until the 40R minimum affordability requirement is met, which is the 20% across the district. So yeah, that's where it's a little bit of nuance and kind of inside baseball for the project, or for the zoning, the way it's executed. But that's seems to be the best mechanism the state has determined in terms of kind of enforcing that requirement, is to withhold the payments until the community can actually meet that threshold. So that's the 40R. 40S, as Andrew inquired, a different section of Massachusetts general law, but directly related to 40R. And it is a calculation per pupil. So it's very localized, but it's drawn from a pool of funds that is, to my understanding, inconsistently appropriated by the legislature. So thank you, Mark, for going back to the two outstanding topics. Thank you for clarifying your intentions with the fact sheet packet. We will have it as slimmed down and ready for your final insertion. And that will be one of the sets of materials that is available for these events. But it sounds like it won't be ready for annual town meeting. But what we will have ready for annual town meeting is a announcement flyer. And this is a draft. And right now I'm just hoping to get some feedback on the language. I zoom in. I'm waiting on a nice image of Route 9 along Route 9 in Hadley. I reached out to Alex and asked for a nice picture that isn't too heavy on the construction and or traffic. So hopefully he'll find something that is shows a nice image of the types of buildings that exist along Route 9, and we can think about the future. But essentially, a little hook statement there at the top, share your voice. Join Hadley residents in conversation on the Smart Growth Zoning Project to learn more about the topic and share your thoughts on future development along the Route 9 corridor. Public forum on Smart Growth Zoning along Route 9. Dates are Saturday, May 17th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. or Thursday, May 22nd, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. This is at the Hadley Senior Center, 46 Middle Street. This is hosted by the Smart Growth Steering Committee. And then to help us plan for the event, please let us know you're coming by pre-registering online. Register by visiting this link URL or scanning the QR code. It's a very short survey. It's, ask how many attendees would you like to register, and then which events would you like to attend. And you could click on both, and it even says, you're welcome to join both events. And then there's the optional, if you would like to stay informed, feel free to share an email.
And do you have any food allergies?
Oh,
There are two things about this. One
Sure.
is, we said it would be helpful. Let us know. We don't want people to not register and then not come because
Right.
they didn't register. And
Okay.
senior citizens are not gonna
I'm not gonna use a QR code.
QR code or some of them even computers. I do Medicare counseling, believe me. A lot of them,
Would they,
and all they have is a smartphone, which is
Would
hard to
they-
do that.
would they email?
They might email, yeah, they would email or text.
Okay. Cause I could put I could give my email, my mtd.hadley@gmail.com. That's the separate from my personal email. That's the one I use for planning board. We could put that.
Yeah,
Yeah, like registration
not,
is helpful, but not required.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, you're okay with an email address on here?
Sure, and this is what we're handing out at town hall.
This is what we're gonna have
Oh.
ready at the town meeting and
Right.
yeah, put up around town.
Or I could whip up a new Gmail address that would
Hadley
be,
Smart Growth probably
Yeah.
taken.
yeah, I could do HSGC, I can try and set that up. Why don't you give me till tonight? And I'll let you know, I'll try and set up an email just for this.
Another
Or,
option is if you want to have an email with an @hadleyma.gov ending, you could use my email
Are you okay with
instead of
that,
creating a new
Kayla?
one. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
All right,
oh,
I would prefer that just to make it easiest for everybody. And Kayla can give us a
Thank
heads
you.
up.
Extra cookies for Kayla.
All right, Kayla, I will add you as the contact person to register.
Okay.
I I'm just making a note, add
Yeah.
Kayla's
Yeah.
email. I'll
Yeah.
clean it up and get everything formatted. But essentially, it's going to be, I'm imagining this yellow block will actually be an image that will be somewhat transparent. So it's not quite saturated, but
Okay.
it'll be kind of an unfocused, but nice picture. Any other issues or thoughts on the text? I'll change that to and. We're having two.
Is PVPC gonna be able to print these?
Yeah, so that's where
Okay.
I'm printing these tomorrow before I come up that direction at the end of my day, which will be, I'm hoping to be, I have to be at Steve Lewis Subaru by 3 o'clock. So I was going to come through town hall between 2:30 and 3.
Should you
Is it
say,
okay?
Sounds good. Yeah, that's great. I have some other materials for the Community Preservation Committee, so I could put them in the same pile, bring it to town meeting.
Awesome. So it's okay if I just swing in and drop them off with
Yeah,
you?
perfect.
Great. Any thoughts on how many?
I don't know. I mean, I think that 50 should probably be good. People can always take a picture of it, and I expect that some people will be able to just use the QR code and sign up right there. But I mean, 50 minimum,
Okay.
100 maximum.
Okay.
That's for us to hand out at town meeting?
we had talked about posting
Yeah.
pieces
Yeah.
to,
Oh, yeah, and then extras to post around town, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll likely print out, I may just print out like 75, hand 15 off to Kayla for posting
Okay.
and distributing across town, and then 60 for town meeting.
should it say public forums with an S?
I thought about that, but
There you
then
go. Sure.
it might sound like they're not the same.
Yeah,
Oh,
I would just do,
And, you have and, I would change that to or.
That's
Yeah.
what I had first.
Or I would leave it that, if it wasn't too wordy, I'd say identical subject matter to
Yeah.
available,
We can't explain every detail, but
Too
okay, but
showy.
this gets it across succinctly. And share your voice is a nice hook, right? That's
I think that's one of the things, if I'm handing them out before town meeting, I'm gonna say, there are two dates, it's gonna be the same thing, you don't have to commit to both, we're trying to capture more people with 2 dates of the same.
yeah, that works.
what time do we need to get there at town meeting to be able to, I don't know when people start coming.
Yeah, probably 6, I don't know how early they come.
An hour early?
6:15, I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah,
Well, probably at
6:15 or
6,
6.
you're just getting the town staff that's setting up, so maybe I'll aim for like 6:20.
Yep. And I would just remind everybody, I'm sure Randy will as well, but this is okay to distribute outside of the meeting space. So outside of the main gathering area.
Yeah.
Okay, so the text looks good. I will add Kayla's email and just clean up that little text box and make sure it fits. And then I'm just waiting on a nice image to insert in this yellow block area. And then I'll have that printed and delivered to Kayla at Town Hall tomorrow between 2:30 and 3.
So Kayla, are you coming to town meeting? Should I pick those up from you earlier or?
Yeah, town meeting, so I could bring them over.
Okay.
Thank you, Kayla. Doing great. Are you
Yeah.
also the CPA administrator?
Yes,
Man, you wear many hats.
I know.
That's awesome. Very impressive. All right. This was the last thing I had on our agenda for things that we're absolutely ready to finalize. It looks like the next meeting is set for Wednesday, the 14th of May at 5 o'clock. Aiden will be our PVPC rep, and it'll be on his shoulders at that point.
If you want to send pictures, please feel free to send pictures of
Oh, you want me to send you pictures?
The new Finnels, yes.
Oh, right. Okay. I was like, no, you're sending us pictures. I got what? Okay. I may. You definitely won't find them on social media. So,
You're not required to just know that they're welcome if you do.
oh, thank you.
If you're gonna be,
Yeah, it all depends if I'm even sleeping well enough to think about it. I might forget. Okay, that's all I've got for us. Unless Aiden has anything that I've forgotten.
No, that's it.
hey, anything else? We exceeded our normal, well, no, I guess I was late, so.
It's fine.
Thank you very much. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, a second.
Second,
All right, all in favor, roll call. Andrew?
Andrew Gnatic, aye.
Ronnie Williams, aye.
Mark Dunn, aye. We are adjourned.